Wow, good morning again. Today is a very special day for us as a church. I know that all of us are aware that it is not a difficult time for the government and for the people living in this land. There is a part that the church has to play. We cannot be outside of the situation. And the Emmanuel God has come with us, right, to be with us. Means that the church also needs to be in the world and be salt and light there. Today we are creating a dialogue, a panel discussion in the form of panel discussion. There are 4 panelists this morning. First we have Auntie Stephanie Auntie, who represents the law firm. Second we have Uncle Nari, who represents the news media. Journalism, and third we have that represents the asking people group, who are the young people. But now we know that it's not only the young people. There's a majority of the Hong Kong asking for something, and that is represented by Miss Sandra. So we are really, really grateful that they have taken this burden and courage to stand in the front of us and share with us their heart. This is not a normal panel discussion like we have in any other social setting. Definitely this is in a church, right? Therefore we have formed some questions that we'll be talking today. What sets the church apart from any panel discussions outside is that we are careful. Yes, of course, we are careful with our words, but we also speak with compassion. And so therefore, I urge all of us, as a church, all of you and all of us are the 4th panelists, okay? We, congregation, the 4th panelists, we get to ask questions. And let us not ask questions just because we want to make a point, but let's ask questions that is in our heart, okay? So some of the questions that we're asking is, what do you see? And it's not just saying, but what are we seeing? What are the truths that we are seeing? Truth about the protesters, truth about the government, police. Some have labeled some group as extremists, the neutrals. There are so many groups that are right now in Hong Kong. What do we see? What do you see? What do you see with compassion is the question. And second question is, what acts of compassion is God nudging us as a church to do for such a time as these? So to open up, I will invite Auntie Stephanie. And as they are speaking, please form some questions that you would like to ask afterwards. And do we have all the translations ready? Translations ready? Yes, thank you. Oh, can I have all the panelists in the front, actually? Please be seated. Woohoo!
Good morning. Even though we're a small church, I think our pastors are very brave to tackle this topic here. Yes. I'm standing up because otherwise you won't be able to see me. Now, I'd like to start with a very small video. Yes, the first one. And whilst they're doing that, because I took my thumb drive here, and it was empty. So I think spiritual attacks. But anyway. Okay. It's just for half a minute. It's okay. No need for that. Yes. So for those of us who were here, the summer in 2019 in Hong Kong has been a very unusual time. And it started with the government trying to push through a bill for extraditing people to trial in China. Now, I want to keep the legal stuff very, very simple. Otherwise, we won't have enough time. But basically, because of the very different legal system that happens between China and Hong Kong, there was a great fear amongst the people that there might be drummed up charges and being tried in an area where you are convicted. You are guilty unless you prove yourself innocent. And trials, there is no need for any witnesses to come forward. It can be by just some person writing a certificate to say that you are guilty. And that would be good enough evidence. So there are lots of other stuff within the legal system, but as I said, we're not talking about it. A lot of young people and old people too felt a lot of concern about this because they felt that the freedoms which were guaranteed under the basic law were being infringed. And so you see lots of these protests. Now what you saw just now happened in August, which is sort of midway from June until now November. And you would be able to see the number of people in just different levels of Hong Kong who were joining in because they wanted to be heard. They wanted to say, we don't want this law and we don't want the government to rush through it without discussing with us. And so what happened after that? No, this is second. What happened after that? You see the outpouring of people, and unfortunately, what the government tried to do was to suppress all these movements instead of addressing their demands and having a real dialogue. And so what you have been seeing at the latter end, the second half of the movement, is that instead of these peaceful demonstrations, there has been lots of quarrels and bickering about, what the police did wrong and what the protesters did wrong. And all social movements are messy, just like any human society. And also because there was an extra dimension, which was that the police have admitted that they dressed up as protesters. And so which of the acts were done by the real protesters and which were actually done by the pretended protesters, nobody knows. And so there was a huge cry amongst the community, including the former Chief Justice, saying that we should have an independent commission of inquiry so that we really get down to the bottom, and because the truth will set us free. And, but unfortunately, that has also been denied. So what we're seeing, yes, every day there's a new change. And the unfortunate situation in the last week has been really terrible, actually, I would say. And so this is the latest. The students have written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these letters of apology. And these are all handwritten, not printed and not photocopied. And what it is saying is, just to be brief, you see in the red a lot of dates. The dates, actually what they were trying to say is, we started off being very peaceful. We just presented our views, but you ignored us. And then, so we started being more agitated and putting more force behind our words. And that it was only then that you decided that you will just suspend pushing through the law. So we have learned that violence is the way to make you listen to us. And all those various dates actually just listed out the escalation of the action amongst the different factions. And so at the end, this is their real cry. What they're saying is, we don't ask you to agree with us. We only want you to understand what has happened and to understand our hearts. And I think one thing that I would say is, I've spoken to, sort of the young people on the front, And some of us in our churches have also gone and seen for themselves what has happened. They are pure-hearted. They started this with the idea that they want to protect Hong Kong. They're not doing it because they want to grab another, sort of more money or to say that because we want cheap housing. It's not like that at all. None of the 5 demands are saying, I want a flat or I want a job. They're doing it out of a selfless way, but because we're human beings, even with the best of intentions, our ways are not God's ways. God's ways are much higher than ours. And so I think it's come to a stage where the students realize that they now have to apologize and saying, we apologize sincerely for all the chaos that we have created. We have put everybody to inconvenience. We have sort of trashed the transportation, whatever. And so they're asking for, saying, please understand, please forgive us. We apologize. And so, but they will continue to fight for what they call the glory of Hong Kong. So that is, I think, the hearts of the students. And then the red one. How do we, Trifina says, what do we see? This is a photograph which was taken because I was with the protesters one day, and we were walking up to the, up the peak to where the chief executive's place is. Now, and then every road was actually blocked by these policemen. And they were standing there in the heat and with all their full gear, and they couldn't move. But the protesters were actually shouting and saying, everybody, telling them off and showing the hatred and cursing them and their families. And then I just said, Jesus, this can't be right. So I stepped forward and I yelled to the police, I said, would you like me to pray for you? And they said, yes! I think it was out of relief because they didn't want to be yelled at anymore. So they told me to stand at that spot, not close to them, and you can see the policemen on the top right-hand corner. They were hiding behind the bushes. They were afraid of a small 70-year-old grandma, but they were listening to the prayer because I had to peep to make sure that nobody was, and I was not being attacked by the protesters from behind. And anyway, so I did a prayer, repenting and for all the bad things and asking for God's peace to come on earth. And then I said, Lord, please bless and protect these policemen so that they will go home safely and be with their children and with their wife. And I sensed in the spirit that something moved. So I said, likewise, please bless and protect, everybody out in the streets and all the protesters, and keep them safe and everybody. So I think that is something that Christians are called to do, which is to really pray for them. And when we pray for them like this, you can actually sense this energy of their being placed together on a human level. Then they see one another as human beings instead of cockroaches or dogs or whatever. And there's an energy from God which brings about this. And the last one. Yes. This was last week because the 3 strikes were going to start. So the Chinese churches actually got together and each church took charge of 1 slot of time. And this was before work, 8 a.m. And we were praying, singing in Central. And one friend said she went there at lunchtime, and when she heard the music, she started crying. And then the lady next to her started crying. They don't know one another. But she says so many people were just standing there and just crying as the worship songs were going on. And she said, crying for 20 minutes. But at the end, she's felt so relieved and light, and she just felt her spirit being restored, as if all the pent-up anger, frustration, despair, insecurity, anxiety in the last 4 months had been washed away by her tears. So I think this is something which the church might consider doing. And I think as Christians, we are called, and God will empower us to go around and do the prayers and do the singing and bring the peace, and that the peace which surpasses all understanding. Even though we cannot see the end as yet, but we trust God and we know that He will bring about a better purpose, more than we can ask for or imagine.
Okay, thank you very much, Auntie Stephanie. Now, I probably disagree with maybe everything she said, but the main point is this. I love her, and she loves me, and we're great friends, and having a different point of view is fine. Having different political views is fine. Having different views of the same event is fine. Why? Because we're Christians. We're not aligned to a political view. We're aligned to God's view. We're aligned to God's truth. And we rise above the political arguments that go on. Now, one of my good friends has just retired as head of the biggest law society in Hong Kong. And if he was here, I know what he would do. He would say, "That's wrong. Look at this video from June the 12th that shows that the violence started on the very first day." And he would go on and on and on and on. And then Stephanie would leap up and say, "Well, it wasn't much violence, and it grew." And there would be that type of one side versus another side. I think as Christians, though, we need to rise above this blaming the government, blaming the protesters, blaming the police. We are Christians. We don't hate the protesters. We don't hate the police. We don't hate the government. We don't hate the mainlanders. We don't hate. God has not called us to hate anybody. God has not called us to shout or throw things at anybody. So I'm going to give a very different point of view. I'm an old school reporter, old style reporter. Old style reporters don't believe, we have what we call healthy skepticism. We don't believe the video clips. We think they're probably edited and chosen. We don't believe the memes. We don't believe the Twitter. We don't believe the rumors. We don't believe anything. We go and check. So when I heard that there was a, when the extradition bill law started, I went to the Justice Department and said, "Is this a secret plan from Beijing to snatch Hong Kongers?" And they said, "Nope, here's the document, and here's the address it came from." And it came from, it didn't come from Beijing, it came from Europe. So it was a different story. And you know what? I said, it's fine. I listened to everybody. When there was the universities have been sealed off. So so 2 days ago, I went to one of the universities and all the entrances were just blocked with huge piles. Now, one good thing about old school reporters, we can talk our way through any door. I'm so proud of that. Ever since I was young, I can talk my way through any door. And so I said, and they're all standing there, they're guarding on the roofs, they're marching on the roofs, all dressed in black with weapons. Pretty scary. And I just went right round the university until I found an opening where people were standing. And I took my way inside. And I went in and talked to them. And they made a very good point, which is that they said, "We believe many people have been secretly murdered and thrown in the sea." And they have a list of, I think, 118. And, you know, I know it's not true, but if they believe that, then I understand why they are being quite violent. But of course, it's not actually true. It's the social media things that go round. So then what do? I go to the police. And again, I like to get everything from the original source. So I call up the head of police relations. Billy Wong, his name. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to police officers. So I go and talk to police officers. And the stories they tell me also, like the student stories break my heart, so the police stories, they break my heart too. The students are just nice human beings who've been told this shocking story of secret murders and believe it. And the police are also in a state of shock because they're saying, look at the stories that are going around about us. Like we've murdered secretly all these people. We don't do that. You know us. You've been a court reporter. You've been a reporter for 30 years here. You know us. And I say, yeah, I know you're not secretly murdering people, but that's what people believe. And they said, you know what, when we're out there, we have a heart for them. One of them told me a story I won't forget. They have this, they're never allowed to start the attack. If they're being attacked, they have to lift a banner saying, please disperse or we will use force, and then they have to wait. And what happens is that the nice peaceful ones will step back, the less peaceful ones will step forward. And they have to wait, and then when it's time, they say, okay, now we can call for dispersal. And then one of them said, look how young they are, they're children. And they went to ask their boss, can we change the wording on the banner? Instead of we will use force, it's if you don't disperse, we will tell your parents. And the police said, we are parents too. We look at these children, we think, they're just like our children, you know. And so spending time with them was so good. Spending time with the black shirts inside the university barricade was so good. Spending time with the government justice of department people was so good. You know what I found? They're all human beings. They're all trying to do the best. They all want the same thing, a better Hong Kong. They all have Christians among them and non-Christians among them. All three groups are just humans trying to get through life. They're not monsters. None of them are secretly conspiratorial people murdering anybody. They're all just trying to do the best they can. So my advice is, I'm the media. I've worked for the biggest media, BBC, New York Times, Guardian, that you just saw. I've worked for all those publications. Ignore them. Don't trust them. Trust your heart. Trust your conversations. Trust what you see. Trust what God tells you. Trust Jesus inside you. Trust anything except all the stuff that goes around the media, the video clips, the little announcements. Just keep them down to one side. You know, there's a saying, take it with a grain of salt, which means just be a little bit skeptical. Not in a bad way, not in a cynical way, but in a sensible way. So if someone says, this group is killed people, you say, okay, let's not discuss it. And then you don't turn it into a fight. And if the other group says, they kill people, okay, just listen quietly, smile, understand and listen, but don't accuse the other. As Christians, we can rise above these accusations that it's the government's fault, it's the protesters' fault, it's the police's fault. All of them are just human beings. All of them, there are some bad people there. I've seen them myself. I've been threatened. I've been chased myself. It's fine. That's part of my job. I'm used to that. But our reaction as Christians must be, I think, to step back and to step up. So the message from the media representative is don't trust the media. Thank you.
For me, it's not easy to share my views in just a few minutes, but I will try to share what I see in this movement in compassion. Some brief background of myself. I'm a 27-year-old Hong Kong young people, as defined by the society. And I'm raised and received education in Hong Kong. And now I'm serving at this church with Pastor Abson and Trevina. And I would like to share the following in my humble and limited perspective, mainly from the perspective from the young protesters. And this is also my personal point of view, so it does not represent all of them. So as Auntie Stephanie has briefly told us about the background, it all started in June with the 2 large-scale protests with 1 and 2 million people against peaceful protests against the passing of the extradition law, and with the government's pride, I think, and poor decision-making, and things got heated up and escalate until now. So as you can see, most protesters are young people. And I see the root cause as fear, anger, and distrust, which is understandable as we see how the government and the police force respond up till now. Ever since the escalation of the police brutality towards the unarmed students, anger and hatred has gripped both parties. So before we blame the protesters, the rebellious behavior, have we stopped and asked why would these young people willing to risk their time, effort, and knowing that there are serious consequences to bear, and risking their future, even their lives, coming out and voice out? I see one big reason behind is that they feel hopeless with the future and with the current government and the system, which is affecting their future. Social inequalities are getting more serious. The government always stands on the side of the big business, never on the side of the poor, and driving up the price of the properties. So no ordinary university student that we all, some of us are, that could afford a house now. And policies favoring mainland Chinese to take away our resources, public housing, schools, hospitals, etc. And another reason I see that is the fear of losing the freedom that we used to enjoy. And this fear is very real. And I'm seeing that freedom is losing. The freedom of speech, the freedom to assembly, the freedom to remain Hong Kong as Hong Kong, but not one of the cities in China, and the freedom to speak the truth. And with all the incidents that happened, justify their thoughts. The 21st in July, the Yulong suspect gangster collaboration with the police. The 31st of August, Prince Edward MTR police attack. And the 15-year-old girl, Sun Yinlam, who was lost and found dead in the sea, and who was claimed to be committed suicide. And even the 22-year-old Zhao Zilok, who fell during a police clearance operation, and now his death is still suspicious. Just to name a few, and not to mention the police excessive use of tear gas, pepper spray, or even real guns towards unarmed citizens and students. And these are truly suspicious cases, and some with obvious record of truth, but the government and the police force still choose to twist the truth and turn the blind eye to it, which leave no space for discussion. And they are demanding independent investigation with truth exposed. And they are not satisfied by the government's robotic responses and condemnation, who holds the power on hand, but shy away all their responsibilities and blame it all to the protesters. And it's really heartbreaking to hear them saying, never forget, never forgive. And you taught us that peaceful protest is useless. Could you imagine the amount of unjust and hopelessness that they felt? They felt like they are being destroyed and killed instead of being heard and understood. So they are trying to use all means to help with the situations. They are seeking like higher power like the US, and they are thinking out of the boxes. And you would see also how the creativity unleashed. And don't forget that this is a leaderless movement. And they are using the collective wisdom to organize, and they are backed up by their beliefs. And with that, it is also heart-touching to see such great unity, sacrificial love, and support across professions and generations. But as a Christian, I am also saddened to see that the highest power that they could rely on, indeed, is not the US, nor themselves, but God. And they have no stake in the society, quoted Carrie Lam, young people and students are now being seen as rioters, this shows that the government has given up on them. So how should I see that how a church could respond with these young people? So since June, Hong Kong has entered in a different season and stage. This is no longer the peaceful, stable society we know. And I also see that God is tearing down all the idols and calling us to reflect, especially for church. And we are warned in the Bible not to grow cold in the end times. As Hong Kong is suffering, we are suffering together. And as the government might have given up on the young people, I urge the church keep pursuing them. And they are the future of the society as well as God's kingdom. And young people need the touch from God to heal them, to change their hearts, and to give them a hope beyond what they are fighting for, to give them the inner freedom that no authority could steal, and to teach them to bear responsibilities for themselves and others, and to release them to their full potential in God, how God created them. And as young people, we might have made many mistakes or being naive or immature, but I hope the church would be patient with us. Instead of simply condemning violence, I hope the church would first understand their frustration, listen to them, and bear with them so that they could grow. And we also desperately need role models who are not necessarily perfect, but someone who has good character with sincerity to walk with young people. And I personally also have to repent on being quick to judge, angry, and fall into my own pride and judgment to any opposite perspective. And I believe only with love and understanding shall we able to connect one another. And the church need to be first to repent, and we need to hear different opinions as how this panel discussion is hosted. And we need to pray for each other and genuinely care for each other, even though we are standing in different perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, all three of you, for sharing your views and ideas and your heartfelt thoughts to us. Now is the time for question and answers. Anybody, please bring up your question. I guess I will start with first while you are thinking. This would be to Auntie Stephanie. While you listed out the handwritten letter up there, it really broke my heart, because what you shared, that the young people are saying that we don't need you to solve all the problems, but we just want you to understand our heart. I think essentially what the protesters are asking the government and all of us is to understand their heart. As I say that, I also think they are also looking for somebody like the government to solve the problems, because the demand of 5 demands, not one less, seems to be a form asking of not just understanding their heart, but actually to get all that 5 demands. So what are they asking for? Are they asking for understanding of their heart, or are they asking for all 5 demands, or both of it?
Okay, maybe I didn't express it as well, better. What they're saying is, we do not ask you to agree with us, but we ask you to understand us. Yes. So with the solving, but it's also true. I think they have actually not very great expectations that the government is capable of solving, many of the issues in Hong Kong. But to say the 5 demands, not one less, as in all movements, actually you get some sort of pithy statements, which are slogans. And that doesn't necessarily reflect all the complexity and nuances inside. And what is normal, I would say this, because yesterday I and some of us here participated in a big forum where international experts who had been dealing with South African apartheid and the Myanmar debacle and lots of movements all around the world, they were saying it's nothing unusual about what is happening. It's normal for one side to say, these are my demands, and I will not back down unless you answer, you agree to all of them. But at the same time, they say it is also very normal for the governments to actually say, no, we're not going to concede, we're not going to negotiate with you. And they say that kind of a game has been going on, from past history until now, and it's not only in Hong Kong, it's in all the world. That is the opening bit. But as a lawyer, I can say, that's what happens. The plaintiff actually says, I want X dollars, and I'm not going to stop suing you unless you give me this money. And the defendant says, no, you're suing me wrong, and I'm not going to pay you 1 cent. Of course, that's the starting position. You don't end at the starting position. You are supposed to go ahead and dialogue and negotiate and find out, why do you want this? What are the underlying reasons? Now, can I satisfy this, what your underlying demand is, by a different way? For example, like, I've been trying to talk to whichever young person is able to listen to me. Like, violence is just a means. It's a strategy. What are you trying to strive for? You want to get the purpose of people now, to this stage, I think we all conclude that unless we have a democratic government, the chief executive is still going to sit there and thumb her nose at us, no matter how many people come out and say they don't like it. So it's this kind of atmosphere. You don't dwell on what the means and the strategy and the expression is. You should be dealing with the underlying reasons and the underlying demands. And then that's the way to go forward. I think because I'm also a mediator, and that's what we learn. But the government closes the door very strongly. It held one public meeting with, I think, 400 people. And it did not respond to what the people were saying. It was just, people say it's just a show. They just sit there and, you can talk, and full stop, and we go away. And nothing has been done. And it hasn't, no second meeting has taken place. Nothing has evolved from that. So all the doors seem to be closed for negotiation. And that is a very sure recipe for disaster in any kind of conflict. Would you like to?
Yeah.
Let's keep the responses to at least 1 minute max.
Yeah. Again, I'll disagree with everything Stephanie said. There've been numerous approaches that all the student unions have been approached, all the protesters' unions have been approached. There've been more than 20 approaches, all of which have been refused. But again, I like to rise above this type of simple argument. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right. We need to rise above that. We need to rise above blaming one side. Both sides need to see each other's points of view and acknowledge that the other side has a legitimate point of view. Once you've got that, then you can talk, then you can listen, then you can resolve. But if we paint everything black and white, my side is good, yours is bad, my side is bad, yours is good. If we paint it like that, we will just get nowhere. So we need to be open to these things.
Okay. Thank you, Nuri. Any questions and comments from the congregation? Please. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So please keep it. You don't have to be politically right over here in this place. Just ask what you want to ask. Just be straight. We have limited times, and then also responding time. We'll just keep it short. So, but I'm going to open up for the people those who even have the comments. You want to comment on something, and it enlightens us. And just share with those things. Okay. I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Right. Okay. I just say I just represent a normal Hong Kong resident. Okay, and also, one of a church congregations here. To me, I would say I believe there's many people just like me. We will so-called say we are neutral. We think the government is it's not doing their job, but every day we also see the protesters, are actually harming the societies. To me, I don't know what to do. Okay, I even not turning on the TV news, for ABO, because even kids, they several Sundays ago when we had the event here, like one of our old friends, Denver, came with his kids, Ross was keep saying, very frustrated, I want to go, because he was worrying about the protester coming to Nathan Road. So I felt very hurt, So to me, I really don't know, because I don't want to fall into a trap to go to, this side or the other side. But what is your advice, to us, as a Christians? Yeah. Do you want to start?
Or maybe we listen to the other question first. Yes.
Okay. The questions to Stephanie Auntie that you have. The question is for Stephanie Auntie and also for you, as you also go to the university to check out how is like you want to know about the answers, and you go further as you work as a reporter. And then Stephanie Auntie also have just standing in front of policeman who is just targeting, and at the back side there was a protest. Don't you feel a kind of afraid, so that you were so much to help the community? So at that time, how do you feel?
Okay.
Yeah. How do you
Yes, I think both of you are talking about anxiety and insecurity and a sense of helplessness in the present situation, right? That is what I gather. And I think it's very unfortunate that it has come to this stage, which was why I especially asked for the last slide, which was the prayer meeting in Central. The prayer meeting in Central really does a lot of good for people to actually come before God, or even for non-believers, just to quieten down. Because nowadays, the mass media is so, you get all these terrible news coming and going, and people beeping you at 2 a.m., and sending you new videos. We need to be still, I think. We need to take time to be still before God. Yes, there are certain of our daily functions which are being stopped, which was why the students had to write this apology letter in handwriting, because they do realize that, and they do apologize. But we hope that it is only going to be temporary, or at least we should all try to go out and talk to whoever is willing to listen to us, to say, you should stop. You should stop and try to change your method. It's just a method. Why not use a different kind of method? And I had one young man say to me, says, Auntie, if you can tell me a new method, then we are prepared to listen. For example, I can tell the people, the young people, stop throwing bricks. Please throw at them your brochures, your writing as to, what you are doing and what you can do and what you think the government can do and what everybody can do. And he says, that would be a very good slogan for me to sell to the young people to stop the violence. But as the older generation, he says, are you able to give us more methods? And the horrible thing about that, the heartbreaking thing about that letter of apology is that they feel that they have no alternative.
They could agree to come to some of the meetings.
Yes. But we know that there are alternatives. And I think it's now got to the stage of, Alan, the ordinary people in Hong Kong. The ordinary, decent people of Hong Kong who doesn't want to blame anybody, who can actually see the good on both sides. I think it's time for these people, what we call the second track 2 people. The lower down, the track 1 people are the ones who go into the streets and protest. Track 2 people are the ones in the middle. Track 3 people are on the apex, those are the decision makers. Now, we cannot just keep saying the decision makers should do this. It's now, I think, the battle has come to this track 2, which is where all the ordinary people should also start speaking out, start thinking of new ways, start trying to engage both sides. And I think Nuri's done a wonderful job. You know, go in and talk to the police. I don't think they would talk to me, you know, but talk to whoever is within your sphere of influence and find out what their concerns are, explain to them the other point of view, and we don't need to persuade the other person, but we can explain and have understanding. And it's when both sides understand one another, then the atmosphere for coming to an agreement can begin. So I think the battle has now come to the middle, tranche 2. This is where we are, and this is where the Christians should be working at.
Yeah, can I just make a point on this anxiety? I really feel that too as well. So one of my other jobs is I'm a university teacher, so I'm surrounded by students all the time. And one really, really helpful thing I found is to avoid the word they. I have 30 students in one class, 60 in another class. During the protests, how many of them go to the protests? How many come to class? 95% come to the class. 5% go to the protests. I've been to the black shirt protests at the universities. First time there were 62 people, second time there were 76 people, third time there were 100 people. How many enrolled students? 16,000. 16,000, okay, and there are about 100 people at each of the black shirt rallies. So we can't say they and think it's all the students. It's not. I think you made this point earlier. They're different. It's a minority of students who are causing big trouble. Most students are just lovely, lovely, calm people. I just want to adopt them all. They're so gorgeous. Okay, so let's not say they want this, they are asking this, it's not. It's just they're all different. About the anxiety thing, that's a big deal for me because like I'm often in a dangerous situation. At least once a week, I'm surrounded by black shirts. They grab me because I'm the one photographing all sides. Most reporters only photograph the police because if they catch a shot like that, they can sell it. But I'm photographing both sides, so the black shirts eventually realize this and they surround me and they say, "You're photographing us." No photo. So they'd make me, if I use my phone, it looks, it's easier to hide. So I take out my phone. Well, the first time this happened, I took out my phone and they surrounded me and they said, "Delete all those photos." So I deleted them all. And then they let me go. And then I press recently deleted. And then I press recover. And of course, I had them all, could deliver them to the newspaper. But, these are scary moments, but I get less scared now. On Tuesday, same thing happened. They just ran up to me and surrounded me, said, "Delete all your photos." And I just said, "No." And they didn't know what to say. Nobody had done that before. I just said, "No, I'm not going to." So, as a Christian, of course, my heart was in my mouth, and I was praying, I hope they won't kill me, I hope they won't kill me. But I have to do my job, So we need God in these scary situations.
Last one question. Okay, last two questions, but short responses, please.
My question is very short. So I see, because I'm outside. I will not say I'm outside. My wife is from Hong Kong and my daughter is here now. But what I see from my point of view is whatever the protesters, whatever happening here, I see is it's kind of like very like leadership thing. And I don't see that where we say it's like the movement is without leader, like from the other side. But I don't understand why they don't have a leader. So is this something like the people don't want to, like they don't dare to come and say, I want to lead this movement? Or this is something that they scare, or like they don't want to be involved, or like, so they want to part of it, but why people don't want to come up, jump in and say, I will lead this movement? Why there is no leader? Because I see it's like there's no leader, with a leaderless movement happening. That's why it looks like a ship without sailor. So they are just straight, like they're going everywhere. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, from my perspective, what I see is that because back then, 2014, Umbrella Revolution, there was like a love and peace kind of a movement that led by three main, they are also Christians, and with that they are being caught and now they are arrested. So now up to 2019, where it all started, and I believe even with the previous, the so-called representative Joshua Wong was also just being released as well. And I think right now, because with the internet and the use of the technology, they are actually, it all started with really without leader. So that's why it sees how each people, they are really starting to movement, and it all started with a forum and internet, and they all come out with first 1 million and 2 million peaceful protests, and with that they are all starting to think of the strategies. So from then, it's also one of the slogan with the protests is also be water, because they feel like if there is a leader and that person being caught and the rest are not, might be moved by it. So they do not want, that's why the strategy is too scattered. The whole movement is very scattered. So some might agree with that, some might not agree with that. And they have been saying that, but God said. That means they are not going to separate with, they are supporting with what the protesters are asking for, which is the behind is to ask for democratic government, and they feel like they need to be united. So if there is a leader, and I think there's also no one capable leader where they are not being scolded by each party because each of them hold different opinions. So now it becomes like almost like a leaderless movement. And if whoever political person who try to step up and set on behalf of that, they would think like they are ripping off the whole group and they want to get the vote. That's what I see. Yeah.
Okay, this one's going to be pretty quick. So, one thing that I noticed that agitated protesters a lot is the lack of effective dialogue between the protesters and the government. And so, my question would be, why has previous attempts of dialogue failed? And what would an effective dialogue between the two groups look like?
Maybe just to follow from what Sandra said, that was the reason why the students' unions refused to go up and see Carrie Lam, because they say Carrie Lam just wants to flush out who the leaders are, and then she puts them into prison, which is exactly what happened after the Umbrella Movement. So that's just to follow on part of it. And also, what would a real dialogue look like? I think the real dialogue, as I said, would have to now get to the stage of the middle level of the people there, so that the identity and the protesters would actually be protected. But there would need to be more maybe informal negotiations going on, and because I'm repeating a lot of what I learned yesterday from the forum yesterday, because internationally they say that this is the way to move things forward, because it's difficult for a government to actually say, yes, I concede, I give in. That won't happen. So a lot of the molding together of the stuff has to go in the background. But it also means that the support from the general public is very important. If the general public still feels that there should be democratic reforms, then they don't have to go out and throw bricks, but they have to make their voices heard in a very civilized way. And that is the way that you keep up the momentum, and you can really get it's not just the dialogue. What we want at the end is actually change. We want the change to happen, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's also notice that the numbers are dwindling. It's very much. There are maybe 100 people at the most at the university where I was at, 100 at the most. So most people, excuse me, most people have separated from that very active movement. You can see crowds of people picking up the bricks. Like yesterday, there were crowds of people picking up the bricks, and there were protesters firebombing them. So you can see that things are changing. So numbers are dwindling. Yeah, I know. You're going to say it's PLA disguised as protesters disguised as police officers. But yeah, I've heard that theory. But let's move away from the conspiracy theories.
Okay. Thank you so much, all three of you, for daring to share with us. You may go back to your seats. And can we all give them a round of applause? You know, when there are about 100 students coming out and saying we have a problem in our society, then maybe, you know. But when there are masses and masses of people coming into the street and then voicing out something, there must be something wrong in the system. There must be something wrong. And there must be something that they are asking. And I would like all of us to draw attention to, I was really touched when Sandra said, church, bear with us. We are not perfect, but bear with us. I think this is an action of compassion too. And that this we must extend with the young people and also with the police force and the government. Bearing with one another. Even when the other person is, according to our point, they may be doing wrong. According to our point, they may not be walking in the facts. But bearing one another and trying to listen, trying to be compassionate, aiming and wanting to be bearing with one another, I think will go in the long run. I think it's the call for the church as well, of the many things that we listed of the role of the church. When Carrie Lam was trying to make her policies heard, and she was not able to make her policies, she was not able to complete the policies, you know, my heart tore. Just to see her as a human being and not being able to make her voice heard is humiliating, and you could see in her face. You know, when you see a police who is trying to maintain order in a society and trying to serve this society, but they are forced to be violent, when they are forced to be to use their guns to defend themselves. You know, when they are when bricks and other things are being thrown at them, I hurt, because Nori made up the point, and Stephanie Auntie also made up a point. The basic level is we all are human beings. You know, we have a human value. Right? When the social media did not cover a lot on that cleaning person who died actually, right? We did not talk a lot about that person. It's sad. My heart hurt. But sometimes we feel like, you know, we can hurt. When the tear gases are being thrown at, you know, at that distance, we may have all the facts that it will not give you a permanent damage, but still, it's when somebody comes to your face in that level, you feel intimidated, right? When somebody gives you, when somebody is trying to express their frustration, anger, and then I just think, oh, it's just your thinking that you want to share with me. I think that hurts the other person. I think we are asked as a church to be a compassionate listener. I think as a church we are asked to be a compassionate bearing of one another's burden. And as a church, definitely we have to accept different views, because iron sharpens iron, right? It sharpens one another. But as we do that, we don't sharpen one another just to make a point. We become patient listeners. We become compassionate listeners. Right? I was so happy that yesterday our youth went on a hike and some of them had gloves in their hands. You know, you can use all that gloves to build barricades and all of that things, right? I won't mention the names But they used that yesterday to climb up the mountain, and then they were climbing up the mountain, but it was not a nice hike. It was like the mountain is against your face. Okay, that kind of wall. They were climbing up the wall, and they were using those gloves to help one another up, you know. What I'm saying is we have all the resources in our hands that we can use to help one another and serve one another. In Hong Kong, I really feel for Hong Kong young people, you know, because I think they are trying to make up a point. And also the police force and the government, they are trying to do their best, right? But sincerely, as I think Pastor Wade was speaking back in CCHK, we don't have a perfect form of government. We don't have a perfect form of political system. I mean, we don't have a perfect way of doing things, but still, at least we are trying, and at least we are engaging. And I think this is what church is also asked to do, that we are not keeping ourselves away from the problem, but we are trying to engage. And the one way of engaging is really to look with compassion, and that draws us to the Samaritan story. All of us are familiar with Samaritan story, right? The Samaritan story, in the Samaritan story, what do we see? Passion. Compassion, right? Who is moved with compassion? Yeah, the Samaritan, the outsider, right? And I know in our church, not all of us feel that Hong Kong is our home, right? Not all of us feel that Hong Kong is our home. We are always on the verge of moving outside somewhere. Some people have dual passport, and you are always thinking, if it doesn't work in Hong Kong, I can exit out. So why do I deal with issues of Hong Kong? I don't need to. It doesn't bother me, right? But I think the story of Samaritan is, even being an outsider, we look at Hong Kong with compassion, right? We move in action. And then we aid. And one way of aiding, at least if we cannot do everything well, I think one way of providing aid is we hear with compassion. You know, and who knows, we might change as we dialogue with one another, as we hear from one another. I'm going to pass this to Epson.
All right. I mean, my neck got just more stiffed. I thought, you know, coming to the church, I'm going to go comfortable and you know, blessed, and you know, you have those kind of, you know, like the expectations, right? Going out of the church, you know, being blessed and you know, ministered and all sort of that. But sometimes when we dialogue, you know, like when we go into these things again, it just bothers us so much. During this time, as I was heavily been involved reading articles and all of that, God was just reminding me this verse, and I'm going to share with all of us, even as we, before we move out from this place. This comes from Jeremiah 17, 5. Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 5 to, I'm going to read until 10. This is what the Lord says. Cursed is the one who trusts in the man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. That person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. They will dwell in the parched places of the desert, in a salt land where no one lives. 7. But blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water, that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought, and never fails to bear fruit. 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind, to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve. It's pretty challenging. And you can see when you read in the context of Jeremiah, it's not easy, right? Politically, it's not easy. But he had to share this word to the people anyways. And I think for all of us, that we are reminded constantly that our roots need to be down deep into the water. And definitely that water points to Jesus Christ. He is the wellspring of life. And I think a beautiful thing that we're talking about is the fruit of the Holy Spirit. In that way, we can really share our love. We can really impact this world and be that refuge place. The alternative is, like there is a city, there is a government like fighting each other, but there is no, third way. And what God asks Israelites is to build a city, an alternate place where people can flee during the time of need, during the time of famine or war. And I think God has one thing that the first thing that God asks us to really deepen our roots into the source himself, Jesus Christ. And then we will be able to bear fruits. And then those fruit be able to nourish the souls of weary souls, tired souls, hungry people. Right, and I really envision the vision of the Revelation 21, where he talks about the dwelling of Jesus Christ, and then in His presence we will find hope for all of us. And we just want to conclude with this word, because we don't want to go out from here talking about the sides of where people are siding, or also the situation issues, and then we overwhelm ourselves and we don't see any hope. Right. So our task as a church, I think, for all of us, I believe for all of us, to really be that hope in the city and to raise that hope. I'm gonna ask these questions. Who wears underwear from outside? Who wears underwear from outside? Superman! Yay! Okay, you got the answer already. Okay, I told you yesterday, right? Superman, the only one who wears underwear from the outside. That's ironic, right? That's surprising. Okay, so the point I'm making here, there is a clip in Man of Steel movie. I like watching movies, okay? And this kind of Marvel movies, where you see the Superman he's an alien, he has all the powers that he can do anything. He cannot be die, okay, with the bullets or anything like that. But even the Superman is just shaking, and he's confused and he's fearful, and he says what am I gonna do on Earth? Because it's too big. I'm alone. I don't have any father. I don't have anyone. I don't have parents. I don't have no one in the world. And then the father, his father, already passed father, he comes to life and then says, you're going to do one thing there. That's what is required to do in the world. That's more powerful than anything in the world. And he asks him, what is that? Do you know what is that secret? And then the father tells him that you need to raise hope in people's lives. Right? The hope is something that actually helps people to survive, not only to survive, but to ultimately gain that victory that they are striving for. And of course, for us, this hope is the ultimate Jesus Christ, right? And then I think, I believe that God has given us to really raise this hope that God gives us in Revelation 21. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and He will dwell with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. Listen, for He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who has seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. This is our hope. And I do believe that, all of us as a church, even as we talk about these issues, we always talk about the hope that God has given to us. There is hope. There is hope for redemptions from all of the things that we are facing and going through in our lives. Can we just, all of us, can we bow our head and discern in our hearts the way we stand right now? And thank you for the panelists. And let's just bring our attention to God. Where you stand today? Where are all your roots? What are you feeding on? I'm going to ask these questions to you. And do you really have hope in your life? And do you want to really spread that hope, share that hope to those who are hopelessly walking. Father, we wanna come back to you, God, right now. Yeah, Jesus, Lord. For us it is impossible, but for you it is possible, Jesus. God, we are such a small city, the bride that you are in making, God, in the process of making. And we have a lot of problems, God, in our lives. And Father, we just ask that right now that you would mend our hearts. You would wipe our tears, God, Father, Lord, because we cannot trust men. Yes, Father, Lord, our governments fail, God. Our people fail. Even the youngsters, they just go out of control and sanity, God, Father, Lord. But you're the one who discerns our heart, God. You're the one who leads us into the place that where we ought to be, God, Father. Right now, we ask that you would replenish our souls right now. Bring us into that place that where we can see you, Jesus, Lord. And where we can have not only the perspective, a right perspective, God, but we will be able to bear fruit and move on even in the times of need. Drought, God. And we really compare this time right now, Lord, the season of drought, but we will not fail, Lord, in bearing fruit, Jesus, Lord, as a church. Yes, Lord, as some of us, we talked about that we will bear fruit in compassion, God, Father. We will be compassionate to each other, God, Father, Lord. We will ask what are their needs, and we'll sit down and we'll take time to pray for them and ask them how are they doing in their lives, both in their political place, God, in their arena, outside of their workplace, or in their families, God. Lord, would you please help us to be extra vigilant and consistent in our love to them, God, Father, Lord, in our love to each other. And Father, would you just heal us right now from all the hatred. Heal us, Father, from all the hurts that we are carrying right now, Jesus. Would you heal us, God, Jesus, Lord? Would you heal us, God? Would you heal this city, God? Would you heal our young people, God, Father? Would you heal those parents, those who are at the verge, Lord, in between, God, and they do not know what to do? Yes, God, Father, Lord. Yeah, Jesus, Lord. We give our worries, the everyday worries to you, Jesus. And we give our fears to you, Jesus, Lord. The fears of insecurity of future. Thank you, Jesus. Then in you we find shelter. And in you we can go ahead, God, Father. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.